He has earned over $375 million in NBA salary, owns fortresses in Rancho Santa Fe and Pacific Palisades, and still gets spotted around Los Angeles driving a 1997 Chevrolet Tahoe worth maybe $5,000 on a generous day. Kawhi Leonard is one of the highest-paid athletes on the planet, and he has spent his entire career making absolutely certain that you would never be able to spot his wealth. So what exactly is going on with the most deliberately invisible superstar in professional sports? Let's find out. The man who bought everything and shows you nothing. Here's a thought experiment worth sitting with for a moment. Imagine you woke up tomorrow with Kawhi Leonard's bank account, $160 million net worth, $50 million arriving annually, real estate portfolios in two of the most expensive zip codes in California, a shoe deal with New Balance that comes with his own signature line. Most people, if they're being honest, would not handle that situation with restraint. The Maldives would be involved fairly quickly. There would be jet skis, probably gold-plated ones, and some version of a live stream that the internet would either celebrate or mock depending on the day. The point is that most people, handed that kind of financial power, would feel some obligation to demonstrate it, to let the world know that the arrival had occurred and looked exactly as spectacular as advertised. Kawhi Leonard received all of that money and responded by continuing to drive the same truck he had in high school, wearing plain tracksuits that could belong to anyone, and maintaining a social media presence so inactive that his accounts feel like rooms nobody has entered in years. In a league where the tunnel walk before games has become a genuine fashion moment and players curate their public personas with the strategic precision of luxury brands, Kawhi shows up looking like a man who genuinely forgot that visibility was an option. And here's what makes this fascinating rather than just quirky. He's not performing simplicity for an audience. There's no calculated anti-celebrity brand being constructed here. No PR team advising him that restraint is strategically differentiated from his peers. The invisibility is genuine, and it's rooted in something that goes much deeper than personal taste or financial philosophy. To understand why Kawhi Leonard lives the way he lives, you have to understand what happened to him before the money arrived, because that's where the whole story actually begins. Compton, a car wash, and the education money can't buy. Kawhi Leonard grew up in Moreno Valley, California, and spent significant time in and around Compton, where his father Mark Leonard owned and operated a car wash that served as both a family business and a community anchor. His father was present, engaged, and central to who Kawhi was becoming. Not a distant figure in the background of his childhood, but an active presence whose work ethic and community rootedness shaped his son in ways that would become apparent only later, when everything that grounding had built was tested under enormous pressure. In 2008, when Kawhi was 17 years old, his father was murdered at that car wash, shot and killed at the place that represented everything the family had built together. In a neighborhood where violence was a reality that arrived without warning and left consequences that couldn't be managed or reasoned with or processed through the kind of frameworks that teenage boys have available to them. Mark Leonard was 43 years old. What happens to a 17-year-old who loses his father that way is not something that resolves neatly or gets filed away cleanly into a before and after narrative. It reshapes the entire architecture of how a person relates to the world. What feels important, what feels fragile, what deserves serious attention, and what reveals itself as noise when measured against genuine loss. Kawhi Leonard was already developing into an exceptional basketball player before 2008. But the player and the person who emerged from that year carried something different. A stillness and a focus that his coaches and teammates noticed immediately and never quite found the right language to describe. The internet eventually settled on robotic as its shorthand for what Kawhi projects, which is one of the least accurate descriptions possible for someone whose emotional discipline is actually the product of profound feeling rather than the absence of it. You don't become that contained by not caring. You become that contained by caring so much about the right things that everything else stops commanding your attention. Growing up in an environment where flashy displays of wealth had specific social consequences, where the gap between how you presented yourself and what the neighborhood could actually support created its own kind of danger, Kawhi absorbed an early education in the genuine cost of performance that most NBA players never receive. By the time the contracts arrived, he already knew the difference between what was real and what was display. That knowledge is worth more than any financial advisor, and it cost him more than any of them would have charged. The contracts: how a quiet man became a negotiating force. If Kawhi Leonard's personal lifestyle suggests a man indifferent to money, his career contract history suggests something considerably more sophisticated. A player who understood his own value with absolute precision and refused to accept anything less than what that value warranted, even when the safer choice was sitting right there on the table. The first major signal came in 2015 when he signed a 5-year rookie extension with the San Antonio Spurs worth $94.3 million. For a player who had just won Finals MVP, it was a significant figure but not an outlier. Other players in his tier were signing comparable deals, and accepting the extension was the low-risk conventional move. Kawhi took it, and then spent the next several years quietly becoming something more than the player that contract had valued. The genuinely revealing moment came after he led the Toronto Raptors to their 2019 championship, a performance that established him beyond any reasonable argument as one of the 2 or 3 best players on earth, and then turned down extension options that would have offered security in favor of a 3-year deal with the Los Angeles Clippers that prioritized leverage over guaranteed money. The move brought him home to California, but more importantly, it positioned him to negotiate from strength rather than from obligation, which is a distinction that most players never fully grasp, and Kawhi had apparently understood for years. That leverage translated into a 4-year extension in 2021 worth $176.3 million, pushing his average annual salary to approximately $44 million and confirming what the 2019 decision had signaled. He was willing to take calculated short-term risk in service of long-term positioning, which is the same principle that governs how the smartest investors in any field manage their assets. Then in January 2024, another extension materialized. 3 years, $152.4 million, averaging $50.8 million per season through 2027. By the end of 2025, his cumulative NBA salary had cleared $375 million, with projections putting the career total near $426 million if he completes his current deal. The New Balance story adds another dimension to all of this. In 2018, he was with Jordan Brand on a deal worth approximately $22 million over 4 years and walked away from the extension because he felt the offer lacked appropriate respect for his market position. He moved to New Balance, became the centerpiece of their basketball revival, earned between $5 and $10 million annually, and secured his own signature shoe line. Which means he didn't just switch brands, he changed his relationship to the endorsement entirely, from paid spokesperson to named partner. A man who shows no interest in displaying wealth spent years constructing a business portfolio that generates it at scale, which is about as clean a summary of how he operates as you're going to find. The 1997 Tahoe and the philosophy of getting the job done. Let's spend some time in Kawhi Leonard's garage, because it is genuinely one of the more philosophically interesting automotive collections in professional sports. And the interesting part is mostly what isn't there. The crown jewel of the collection, in the sense of being the most expensive item it contains, is a bespoke Rolls-Royce Cullinan with a twin-turbocharged V12 engine and a customized interior that carries a price tag approaching $400,000. That's a serious vehicle by any standard, and it represents the upper bound of what Kawhi considers worth spending on transportation, which tells you something meaningful when you consider that some of his peers spend more than that on a single watch without apparent deliberation. Below the Rolls-Royce sits a Porsche 911 from the 993 generation, the last model to feature an air-cooled engine, a collector's piece worth around $80,000 that friends describe as a self-gift. It's the car of someone who appreciates engineering and history, rather than someone who wants to be seen arriving in something impressive, which is a distinction the 993 generation perfectly embodies. Beloved by people who know cars, essentially invisible to people who are looking for a status signal. And then there's the 1997 Chevrolet Tahoe that started as a high school car, accumulated decades of use in mechanical wear, and sits in Kawhi Leonard's garage today, worth somewhere between $1,500 and $5,000 depending on how generously you're feeling. He still drives it, regularly, by choice. When asked about it, his explanation was characteristically efficient. It still runs fine, and he's already paid it off. The math checks out. The truck performs its primary function, which is moving him from one location to another, and it costs him nothing to maintain beyond whatever fuel it consumes, which he can afford. The logic is identical to what you find in Chad Johnson's Spirit Airlines loyalty and Tim Duncan's grocery store price checking. A genuine refusal to pay for the status component of a transaction when the functional component already exists and performs adequately. Most people spend significant money on the gap between what a thing does and what a thing signals, and Kawhi has simply declined to participate in that particular market. His version of a car budget is a Rolls-Royce for when it matters, and a 27-year-old Tahoe for when it doesn't, which is arguably more honest about the actual utility of vehicles than anything most automotive enthusiasts would admit to. The real estate. Fortresses, not showrooms. Here's where Kawhi Leonard's financial choices get genuinely interesting, because his real estate portfolio represents the one category where he has spent serious, visible money, and the way he's deployed that capital reveals everything about his actual priorities. His primary residence is a mega mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, acquired for $13.3 million, covering over 1,200 square meters and equipped with a full dry sauna and a custom-designed professional gym. Rancho Santa Fe is one of the wealthiest and most private communities in the United States. The kind of neighborhood where the point is specifically that people outside it don't know what's happening inside it, where the roads don't encourage casual traffic and the landscaping is designed for screening rather than display. It is the architectural embodiment of privacy as a value, and Kawhi chose it deliberately. The Pacific Palisades edition came in 2021 at $17 million, 1,100 square meters, infinity pool with panoramic ocean views, positioned in a community that offers the combination of serious natural beauty and genuine separation from the density and surveillance of central Los Angeles. Like Rancho Santa Fe, the appeal is protective rather than performative. The ocean view isn't primarily there so that guests can admire it during parties. It's there so that the person who lives in the house can decompress in complete privacy from the life that generates the money to own it. The Ritz-Carlton penthouse near Crypto.com Arena, which he listed for sale in 2024 at $6.5 million, served a specific practical function: convenient proximity to the arena on game nights. And when that function was superseded by the Clippers' move to the Intuit Dome, the asset was liquidated rather than maintained as a status symbol. He didn't keep it because having a Ritz-Carlton penthouse is the kind of thing wealthy people are supposed to have. He kept it while it was useful and moved it when it wasn't, which is how an investor thinks rather than how a collector thinks. The total real estate value clearing $40 million represents significant capital deployed, but the through line across every property is the same. Kawhi Leonard has used his real estate portfolio to purchase privacy at scale, and in the specific context of being one of the most recognizable athletes in the world, that privacy is genuinely the most valuable thing his money could have bought. He doesn't need a home that impresses visitors because he doesn't particularly want visitors. He needs homes that allow him to exist without being observed, and he has been willing to spend serious money to ensure exactly that. The silence. Not robotic, just focused. The narrative that has followed Kawhi Leonard throughout his career. The robot label, the emotionless characterization, the various attempts by media and fans to explain his quietness as a personality deficit, deserves to be addressed directly because it fundamentally misreads what's actually happening and why. We live in a media environment built on the assumption that visibility is the natural desire of anyone with something worth seeing. Platforms are designed to reward consistent presence, to incentivize sharing, to make withdrawal feel like a statement requiring explanation. In professional sports, this environment is particularly intense. Athletes are expected to be accessible, quotable, engaging across multiple platforms simultaneously, and willing to participate in the theater of celebrity that has become as much a part of the professional sports product as the games themselves. Most NBA players have accepted this as part of the job description. Kawhi Leonard has not, and the gap between his behavior and the expectation has been filled, as gaps always are, with whatever story was most readily available. The robot story was available because his face during competition is almost preternaturally controlled, because his press conference answers are efficient to the point of brevity, and because he doesn't perform the kind of emotional expressiveness that makes for compelling social content. From the outside, looking for personality markers in the places where athletes typically display them, you find almost nothing and conclude that there's nothing to find. What's actually there is something considerably more interesting than a robot and considerably more demanding than ordinary self-expression. It's an extremely high level of emotional control maintained over years of professional competition under circumstances that would destabilize most people. He lost his father at 17 in a violent and sudden way that rearranged his understanding of what actually matters. He navigated the Spurs injury situation in 2018, which became one of the more publicly complicated athlete organization disputes in recent NBA history, without losing composure or making decisions from anger. He delivered a championship performance in Toronto that is widely regarded as one of the greatest individual playoff runs in NBA history, and responded to the achievement with the same controlled affect he brings to everything else. That's not absence of feeling. That's extraordinary management of feeling in service of consistent performance, and it's a capability that most of his peers have openly expressed admiration for, even when they can't quite describe where it comes from. Kawhi doesn't talk much because he doesn't need to. He doesn't react to every provocation because reacting would cost him something he values more than the satisfaction of reacting. His silence is the sound of someone who has decided what matters and protected it accordingly. The privacy as luxury. What $160 million actually buys. There's a concept worth examining carefully here because it reframes the entire Kawhi Leonard story in a way that makes his choices feel less eccentric and more strategically coherent than they initially appear. For most people who haven't experienced it, fame is conceptualized as an unambiguous reward. The validation, the recognition, the social proof that significant achievement brings. What the experience of actual sustained fame tends to reveal, however, is that it arrives bundled with costs that weren't part of the original transaction. Your time becomes publicly negotiable. Your identity becomes subject to interpretation by people who don't know you and won't be corrected. Your physical presence in ordinary spaces becomes an event rather than a neutral act. The life that the fame was supposed to enhance becomes progressively harder to live because the fame is living inside it. Most superstars manage this tension by accepting it as the cost of doing business. They build structures around themselves that create some separation from the most exhausting elements of celebrity while maintaining the visibility that sustains the commercial relationships that the celebrity generates. It's a compromise that functions reasonably well until it doesn't, and the athletes who burn out or retreat from public life mid-career are often the ones who signed that compromise without fully understanding its terms. Kawhi Leonard never signed it. He understood from the beginning, or learned early enough that it shaped everything that followed, that fame was something that would happen to him as a byproduct of being excellent at basketball, not something he was pursuing as an end in itself. The distinction meant that when the fame arrived, he didn't feel obligated to reciprocate it, to perform visibility in exchange for the platform it provided. He took the money that the platform generated and used it specifically to insulate himself from the parts of the platform he had no interest in. The Rancho Santa Fe compound is privacy purchased at scale. The minimal social media presence is attention withheld rather than attention unavailable. The tracksuits and the old Tahoe are camouflage that actually works. Kawhi Leonard can move through ordinary spaces in Los Angeles in a way that LeBron James, who generates crowds at gas stations, structurally cannot, and the low-profile presentation is a significant part of why. He bought his own invisibility, deliberately, with the money that his visibility generated, and the result is a billionaire-tier athlete who can stand on a sidewalk holding a coconut and have the internet respond with genuine laughter rather than recognition, which is probably exactly how he prefers it. The freedom that silence purchases. The deepest layer of Kawhi Leonard's story is the same one that sits underneath Tim Duncan's and Chad Johnson's, because these stories are ultimately about the same fundamental insight expressed through different personalities and circumstances. That freedom and the performance of wealth are not just different things, they are in many ways opposite things, and choosing one requires accepting less of the other. Kawhi Leonard has earned somewhere north of $375 million playing basketball, and the life he has built with that money is one in which he owes essentially nothing to the external world. He doesn't maintain a public persona that requires feeding. He doesn't have a lifestyle overhead that obligates him to keep performing at the highest level regardless of how his body feels. He doesn't have an entourage ecosystem that functions as an expensive social contract he can't exit without damaging relationships he values. He has 2 private compounds, a small family he protects with military-grade intentionality, a basketball career that he approaches as a craft rather than a performance, and a level of daily freedom that most people with far less money don't come close to experiencing because they've spent their resources on the performance of having resources. His father's murder, the event that restructured everything about how he relates to the world, taught him something at 17 that most people spend decades failing to learn. That the things worth protecting are not the things that can be displayed. The people you love, the peace of your own mind, the ability to move through your own life without constant interference from forces you didn't invite. Those are the assets that matter, and they are precisely the things that ostentatious wealth tends to erode rather than preserve. Everything about how Kawhi Leonard has managed his career, his money, and his public presence since then reflects that understanding operating consistently at every level of decision-making. The contract negotiations that prioritized leverage over security. The New Balance move that turned an endorsement into a partnership. The real estate investments that purchased privacy rather than prestige. The old Tahoe that keeps running and costs nothing. The social media accounts that function as empty rooms. The press conference answers that communicate what needs to be communicated and nothing beyond that. He is not cheap. He is not eccentric. He is not robotic. And he is not emotionally absent. He is a man who decided at an early age what was actually worth protecting and has spent an extraordinary career and an extraordinary fortune doing exactly that, with a consistency that his peers find either confusing or quietly admirable, depending on where they are in their own relationship with money and fame. The 1997 Tahoe still runs fine. He's already paid it off. And somewhere in that sentence, delivered without apparent irony by one of the wealthiest athletes on earth, is the entire philosophy. Own what works, release what doesn't, and never pay for someone else's idea of what your life is supposed to look like. In a league built on visibility, Kawhi Leonard chose to be unseen. In an era where attention is currency, he chose to be broke in the only way that cost him nothing. And in doing both, he became exactly what he set out to be: free, private, and entirely his own. If stories like this are what brought you here, subscribe to Black Status, and we'll keep delivering them. See you in the next one.